Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Good afternoon. I'm Cubby Selby, alcoholic.
Hi, Cubby.
And this is a really great way to start a year. I think I've started more than 1 year this way at this particular club or meeting hall, whatever designation you give it. But they give you your own bottle and God. Well, God bless you, my friend. It says Arrowhead, not John Jameson, thank God. Anyway, I am truly delighted to be speaking at an AA meeting on the first day of the year, of course. Any day of any year that I can stand on my hind legs and talk, it's quite an accomplishment. But there is something significant about this day. I was up until after 10 o'clock last night. I watched that ball fall down in Times Square and said, whoopee. And got ready for the next day. Well, first of all, I should tell you that I'm an alcoholic that never drank in high school, and I never drank in college. I never went to high school, and I never went to college. Let me interject something here. Contrary to all appearances, I'm not going to drop dead. I mean, not right now. After 5 minutes or so, I'll be able to breathe and talk at the same time. Just don't get nervous. It's bad karma. Anyway, I love alcohol. I should tell you that I love it, I love it, I love it. Because for me, drinking was a spiritual experience. And obviously alcohol had to do a whole lot for me in order for me to become willing to let it do so much to me. And ultimately, of course, it destroyed everything I held of value in my life. Put it as simply as possible, I didn't do all the loving, kind things I always wanted to do. And I did all the vicious and rotten things I knew no human being should ever do. But in between, it is such a wonder. It is such a gift of the gods. And if there are any misogynists out there, let me remind you that it's the goddesses that gave us booze. Men had nothing to do with it. See, they knew there had to be some way to control these animals. But it is a great thing. Now, I've experienced all the feelings that we've all had. You know, everybody in Alcoholics Anonymous talk about always feeling alienated. And that's certainly, I certainly always felt alienated. I was never part of anything. I was never worthy of anything. I was always overwhelmed with shame and guilt and fear and all manner of terror and inadequacy. And of course I had no idea this is what I'm feeling. I feel this all my life, and I don't know if there's anything abnormal about this. I just don't know this, and I see other people doing just fine. Apparently, they look like they're handling everything well, but not me. I'm just constant turmoil inside. And I've come to believe that the worst thing that I ever experienced, and perhaps this is true of every human being, I can't think of anything worse, anything more horrendous, is feeling separated from myself. And again, I can't define it. So obviously, if I don't know what the problem is, I have no idea what the answer is, or how to. I can't seek the answer, no matter what may be available. Because I live in a world of duality. For without an up, there's no down. Without a left, there's no right. Without unity, there's no separation. I can't define these things. And obviously, if I feel separated from me, I must feel separated from you. And I must feel separated from whatever this power is that created us. Which means I am all alone in this rotten, vicious, stinking world. And I can't make it. There is no way I can make it in this world until I take a drink. Oh. I take a drink and the angels sing. La-dee-da-dee-da-da. Never mind being tall and handsome. E.T. got, so who cares? Really, you go into a bar hungry for female companionship, you take a drink, hey, who needs some money? They're lucky if they get me. But I take a drink and I become a holy man. I become one whole, solid, unified being. And I have a sense of peace that I never knew existed. It's absolutely marvelous. So I can't conceive of being powerless over alcohol. How can I when it threatens my very existence? I found something here that creates the grand illusion. I don't know that. I believe it's real. But I'm not going to give that up for anything. So I can't accept that I am powerless over alcohol. Now, one of the problems with drinking for me is I black out rather rapidly, and quite often I become exceedingly homicidal. So I might come into the joint and have a drink, and I might try and kill you. That's the chance I have to take. See? And I'm willing to take that chance. I'm willing to take any chance in the world to feel that sense of peace that is so exquisite, inexplicable, and to feel whole, to feel like a whole being. And it makes perfect sense to me now, because what is the purpose of human consciousness other than to get back to our very roots of unity and peace? But of course, I don't know any of this stuff. All I know is I take a drink. Everything is fine. It's just marvelous. Now, I left home at 15, went to sea during the latter part of the Second War, and by the time I was 18, I was in a hospital in Germany, and they said I couldn't live more than 2 months. I had TB, and both lungs were totally shot. There just was nothing left, not even an oil slick. Just nothing there. Now, a couple of weeks before this particular day, while going through the canal in Antwerp. I jumped off the ship. I ran to a wine shop, got all the wine I could carry, and I ran back to the ship. And I didn't think anything of it at the time. And I've come to realize and accept a very simple fact that a non-alcoholic would not run that distance for a few bottles of wine when they didn't have any lungs. But a non-alcoholic does not understand singleness of purpose in the same way that I do. I don't dissipate my energies and falder-rolling around here. But I can't, the reason I can't see it is because I can't afford to. I have to protect my right to drink, so I can't see that I'm powerless over alcohol. And I can't accept that my life had become unmanageable. Yet by the time I was 22 years old, I had spent more than 3 years in bed. I had 10 ribs cut out, one lung collapsed, a piece of the other one cut out. And they used an experimental drug to keep me alive. And it impaired my vision and my hearing. My inner ear was almost totally destroyed and I couldn't walk properly. I'd fall down in the dark. All my muscles were petrified from this drug, and it fried my brain. Whatever was left, it destroyed. And then I got hepatitis and the blood transfusions. And then things started to get bad. They did. I survived. And we all suffer now. Oh, my. But that's a guarantee we have as drunks. No matter how bad things are or appear to be, drinking will always make them worse. You can't avoid or evade the progression of alcoholism. It just keeps getting worse and worse every single day. But of course, I don't know any of these things, and I should stress that everything I say, absolutely everything I say, even if I tell you what's happening at the moment, the only thing I know is retrospect. After the fact, I can look at these things, but I never, ever know what in the hell is happening at the moment. I believe I know quite often, and act on that sometimes. Oy vey. Yeah. So anyway. Now, I've always known in my innermost self that I'm alcoholic. In order to keep that information away from my awareness, I had to develop a belief system of lies. I had to teach myself what is true is false and what is false is true. The basic lie being that alcohol is the answer, not the problem. And one of the things I did to protect my right to drink was use heroin. And I devised a heroin sobriety maintenance program for myself. Because, I love everything about drinking except some of the results. And they were getting increasingly violent and scary. And I'd come out of these blackouts and I'd never, anyway. I had to try and do something to control the results of my drinking. And I found that heroin helped tremendously. It's a great way to sobriety. Now, of course, a program like this is kind of expensive and becomes rather habitual. Now, the second step implies that we're nuts. And what I did is I left New York and I moved to Hollywood to get away from drugs. And it worked. Don't laugh at me. It worked. It worked perfectly. LA Sheriff's Department, some narcs and so forth. Anyway, make a long story short, they strapped me down in solitary and I kicked that habit. It's the no-frills approach of doing it, I'll tell you. It's guaranteed, absolutely guaranteed. So, after a week, they asked me if I wanted to come out of that cell. I said no. By this time, I was truly tired of doing the things I had to do to live the way I was living. I just couldn't take it. And I could no longer deny that I was doing something that was creating the madness in my life. I was still incapable of associating that madness with my drinking. But I knew I was doing something that was causing these problems. And I knew I couldn't do anything to me locked in that cell. So I stayed there, and after a month they kicked me out. Put me with population for a month, and somebody bailed me out. Put me in a hospital for a month, and then suddenly I was back out on the streets. The same world I've never understood, the same world has always terrified me. Only this time I hadn't had a drink for 90 days. And I could no longer really believe in the belligerence and hostility that I always generated to hide my fear from you and from me. And I was so terrified that I couldn't go through an intersection unless I was going for a drink. It was the only motivation that got me across the street. That went on for 15 months, and the woman I was living with brought another woman home with, I think it was 3 children, because they had no place to live. So we moved them in, and this fellow used to come and visit this woman. And one Friday night, he came and he visited with me. Now, as I've said, I'm a blackout drinker, so I don't remember more than a total, perhaps, of, 30 seconds from the entire night. I do remember him walking into the room, walked right by my bottle of wine, didn't even look at it. I mean, that's the image I have in my head. He sat down. The next thing I remember is he got up and he walked over to me and he dropped a book in my lap. And he said, "I'm tired. You read to me." I assume he had been reading to me, but I have no memory of that. But I took this book, I put it on the table, I opened it up, back in the blackout. And then it turned out that night I read from the book Alcoholics Anonymous. I have no idea how much I read. I assume I read at least a part of chapter 3, because evidently I read enough to identify with the problem and to recognize the answer. And obviously you're not going to recognize an answer until you have identified the problem. And he took me to a meeting this following night, and I've been sober ever since. That was the 29th of March, 1969. And a couple of things happened in the next few hours that forced me to believe that miracles are possible without my consent. And I am really delighted to know that. And it's a great thing to accept, because I don't recall any power of any kind asking me, "Hey, Cubby, is it okay if I create the universe?" Can I do it? Huh? And I'm so grateful to know I don't have to consent to it, because, I'm an alcoholic with an alcoholic attitude. I'm also from New York, which means my attitude sinks. And so if I had to consent to that miracle, you know what I would tell you to do with it. Perhaps that's one of the problems with, what do they call these things, recovery programs and stuff like that. They talk to you and try and talk you into accepting the miracle. What folly! Oh, you see, it seems to me that my little experience that night when that guy came in the house with the big book is kind of the principal and basic element that's responsible for all things in all ways. I believe, now, I'm going to tell you what I believe, not the way I act. Because a lot of the time I know life is out to get me. But I've come to believe that life is always seeking balance. It's not for me, it's not against me. Life is. And it is always seeking balance. And I believe what happened that night is the very disease that's killing me has to lead to my recovery, has to lead to my life. They can't be separated. Yeah, like trying to separate life from death. It's impossible. So, part of my problem were these blackouts, part of my drinking problem. And I was in a blackout that night, which meant, as I understand it today, it meant that all those little devices, God knows how many zillions of them, that I had formulated, nurtured, put in place to protect me from the truth, were sleeping. They were on the nod, you know? And so a bit of this information, this truth about my illness, just kind of floated in there. La-di-da-di-da-di-da-di-da. It just floated in there someplace. And there's some kind of receptacle said, so Yankee dog, look at this. Now, I'm not aware of any of this, but the point is, he takes me to a meeting. I hate the meeting. Ooh, filled with people. Sober people, which means everybody's hysterical, right? If there's one unifying factor with alcoholism, it's hysteria. Boy, especially when they find God. Oh, man. So I hated everything about that meeting. When I left that meeting, there was one thing I knew with absolute certainty. I am not an alcoholic. That I knew. Maybe the only thing I knew. I am not an alcoholic. However, I was given the gift of sobriety that night. The obsession to drink was removed. I certainly wasn't aware of it. I have not had a drink since that night. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. It doesn't say I have to be aware of that desire. It's one of the difficulties with this illness, is I have to be recovering from it. I have to be in that process already to become aware of the fact, hey, maybe I really am sick. And I suspect that kind of thing happens everywhere, that the very thing that is destroying me is the thing that will save me. If I am available to take the action necessary to utilize that. I guess who knows how much of the time it goes by, but every now and then I respond. I say, yeah. Now that makes sense. Not doesn't make sense in some academic level, but it makes sense experientially. I'm a visceral person. And those are the things where I live and die. And that's what AA allows me to do. AA doesn't say, let's memorize this, let's understand that. It says, take a look at what has happened to you as a result of your actions. Never mind what anybody did to you. Oh, I have issues. I got them up the kazoo. What what happened? Take a look at the actions. Thank God, because I don't have this kind of mind that can work. I really don't like to say it in public, but I'm not very bright. But it doesn't make any difference here. I'm bright enough to say, okay, I did this. Now, the book says, or somebody tells me to do this and that and the other thing, and then maybe I'll find that thought process that led up to that action. So I've come to believe that what we call life is extraordinarily simple. It's a series of decisions, actions, and results. And I think somewhere along the line, I made the decision to be unaware of my decisions. Therefore, everything I do is somebody else's fault. I am not responsible. Well, that's true in a sense. I'm not responsible. But I have to accept that responsibility, regardless of what has or hasn't happened in my life. I have to accept the responsibility for my actions. Otherwise, there's no hope of recovery. If I really lay it into you or the world or this or that, I just have no hope. Absolutely no hope. One of the things I do every night is when I could thank AA and God and all that stuff for sobriety, I thank myself for taking all the actions necessary to stay sober that day. Because I don't think AA and God, Benny One Ball or Herkimer or anybody else keep me sober if I don't cooperate. And I have to do something. Now, I also believe that somewhere I made that decision, unaware of my decision. So now, if I'm not responsible for the things I do, I can so perfectly and beautifully destroy myself simply by believing that you're doing it to me. And if I didn't make that decision based on self, as the book says, and instead of being very involved and complicated, and it's simple. I'm afraid I'm not going to get what I want or lose what I have. Now, if I'm willing to accept the simplicity and the absolute truth of that simple statement, I have a chance of being free. I can stay free from booze and all the other things that we've used. And I can stay free periodically. Maybe it's only seconds at a time, I don't know. But I can stay free from the onslaught of the ego. So anyway, I can't stand this meeting. A bunch of people. And he takes me home. And I hear myself say to this man, can I go to another meeting? I had no intention of saying that, none whatsoever. And when I said that, I took the second step. Now, I've come to believe that I did not say that. Not the I identified as Cubby at that moment in my life. At that moment, I thought Cubby consisted of this body, the mind, and all those hideous and heinous thoughts that went through the mind. I believe those thoughts defined me. Absolutely defined me. So naturally, I was terrified of me. Absolutely terrified. And I loathed and detested me. I mean, if that's me, I should be loathed and detested. God, let me be the first one in line. So, I believe that within me there is a spirit, a power, whatever you want to call it, that recognized the power in these rooms that could restore me to sanity. And it spoke those words through me. Can I go to another meeting? Now, I woke up the next morning and I started my day in the usual manner. I started a fight with the woman I was living with in order to justify storming out of the house and getting drunk. So if you're going to do something you know you have no business doing, you have to justify it in some way. And what better than that kind of situation? For one thing, 5 minutes after I get to the bar, every guy in that bar is going to agree with me. Right. That rotten bitch. They're all on my side. I can't lose. So I come storming out of the house. I was standing on the corner, waiting to cross the street. And that same voice that I've heard in my head my entire life was screaming at me at that moment. But on the basis of that one AA meeting, which, as I say, I loathed and detested, 2 words in a lifelong litany were changed. And it said, I'll show her. I won't drink. I'll stay sober. And if you want to really punish somebody, stay sober. Because drinking can be pretty horrendous, but you pass out and everybody gets a break for a while. But not when you're sober. And my body turned around and went back to the house. Now that morning the second step took me. I was restored to sanity. How I define sanity is very simple. I can no longer believe the lies necessary to believe in order to justify taking the first drink. I accepted the simple fact that drinking will not improve the quality of my life in any way. Now, I have been mad as a hatter most of my sobriety. And I say that deliberately with full awareness. And if you don't want to believe me, I can bring a list of people, character references, who will voice the same opinion. But I have been sane with respect to alcohol since that moment. So I went back, my body just went back to the house. I went to meetings. And at the end of 30 days, I was stark raving sober. As we all know, there's only one thing worse than drinking. That's not drinking. I mean, can you imagine being in a joint like this New Year's Day? Come on, man. There's only one reason for that. You don't know how to live without drinking. That's my problem. The book says it in many different ways. One point it says that we realize the bottle is only a symbol. What we have is a living problem. I don't know how to live without drinking, or without at least the promise of a drink. You know? But to wake up every morning and say, I'm going to have nothing. Oh, jeez. It takes a while to absorb that simple statement, doesn't it? That's just, you know. So we all get together to remind us that once we stop drinking, now we're faced with doing something about the causes of the drinking, and you know, the whole thing that's laid out in the book. So I'm stuck here. Now the reason for this is like everything I've learned. It's simple and obvious. So simple, so obvious I can't see it. You take away the most important thing in someone's life, you must replace it with something of value. Nature cannot and will not accept a vacuum. Alcohol had become the most important thing in my life. When you take that out of my life, I'm left with that dark, black, cancerous sense of separation that I started with. And if I don't replace it with something of value, I must and will drink. I have absolutely no choice in the matter, because I am powerless over alcohol As the doctor says in his opinion in the book, the drunken state is the only normal state I know. And alcohol is the only thing in my living memory that has ever appeared to heal that unbearable sense of separation. And I believe Alcoholics Anonymous is that something of value that fills that hole and fulfills every need I shall ever have for the rest of my life. So, excuse me. So, I'm stuck. 30 days sober, stark raving crazy. And I went to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and asked for help. I have no idea why. I'm still not aware of anything, not even aware of wanting to stay sober, not aware that there's a need to stay sober. But I went to a meeting of AA and asked for help, and the help was instantly and automatically there. And the reason for that, again, is simple, is that you cannot have a problem without already having the answer. It is a spiritual impossibility to have a problem without having the answer. However, I still have this belief system that I nurtured to protect my right to drink. So periodically I am unaware of already having what it is I am so desperately looking for. So for me, what this process has ended up being, a process of uncovering those lies, discarding those lies, and discovering the truth. So, I get the gift of recovery when I ask for help. Now I'm face to face with that three-letter word. And the kindest thing I ever said about God is that it's dog spelled backwards. After my last operation, I was in a coma for 4 days. At some point in that period, I opened my eyes as a chaplain walked in the room. And I stayed conscious long enough, just conscious long enough to shake my head no and watch him leave, maybe 2 or 3 seconds. And then I went back into the coma. Because I was determined that if I died, I was going to die giving God the finger. And if there was such a thing called God, I couldn't wait to die so I could meet it, spit in its face, and tell the rotten weasel what I thought of it. Some people call that an attitude. And the funny thing about this, or one of the funny things, is I was still a teenager at this time. So it's not that years of drinking are responsible for my rotten attitude. It's just that my rotten attitude made years of drinking an absolute necessity. You know? So I'm face to face with this thing now. What am I going to do? And I hear people talking about prayer, and I won't tell you what I thought about the idea, but again, I'm listening. I don't realize it. And I didn't know what to do about prayer, but I guess I must have been developing a belief in the need for it, because what I ended up doing was copying the third step prayer and the St. Francis prayer and tacking them on the wall. And I'd get up in the morning and I'd read them and go about my business, then read them at night. And then it seemed like everyone's saying you have to kneel and pray. And I really, well, never mind what I thought about that. But as I said, I'm still unaware that I want to stay sober, yet I'm so desperate that I actually tried to kneel and pray. I had 20, 30 times a day I would try it, over and over and over. And it's like my knees were laughing at me. They said, come on, man, you gotta be kidding. You don't go for that shit, no, you can't. Couldn't do it. I just absolutely couldn't do it. And then when I was sober about 3 months, 4 months, I took the fifth step, and when I finished, my sponsor showed me the pages in the book to read that tell you what to do for 6 and 7. I went home, did as the book suggests. When I had taken the sixth step, I was made aware of it. Now, I've come to believe that the essence of the sixth step is simply when there's no longer a payoff in the defect, I'm willing to let it go. Seems to me I've had the insane belief all my life that I could avoid pain by pursuing pleasure. Never again, never ever seeing the simple and obvious. You cannot separate pain from pleasure. The only difference is perception. You just cannot be separate. Yet I keep thinking if I run fast enough after pleasure, I'll be outrunning pain. And of course, I just keep ending up miserable. See, I don't hold on to the pain of resentment. Nobody. I believe it's impossible for any human being to deliberately and consciously hurt themselves. The problem is we hold on to our concept of pleasure. Maybe at one time, whatever we have in mind may have been wonderful and marvelous, may have saved my life, but now it's killing me. At one time, the greatest joy, my great savior, was booze. And then in a wink of an eye, it's tearing me apart, everything I come in contact with, and it's destroying me. Just the difference of perception. I don't hold on to the pain and resentment, but I will hold on to that beautiful, exquisite pleasure of judgment. Thinking I can go home after the meeting, sit in my chair, send the weasel out for pizza, because we want to be alone, you know. When I get inside my shrunken pumpkin head, man, I'm the most powerful thing in the universe. Oh, God damn. I'm also very smart, too. And I just chop, and first comes to work, and I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning in a cold sweat, all knotted up in pain because of a resentment. I can just roll out of bed and hocus pocus God, right? Oh, God, it hurts, it hurts. Ooh, take it away, take it away. You know, in my worst days, I could not imagine a God cruel enough to take away my pain of resentment. I can't fathom that. All I have to do is realize if I don't judge you in the first place, I can't resent you. If I don't judge, period, I don't have any suffering, period. But man doesn't live by bread alone. Gotta throw in a little judgment. Hey, come on, this is serious. Lighten up, you guys. So, but when there's no longer a payoff in the defect, if there's not a payoff, I found I'm willing to let that sucker go. Just get away from me, man. So when I'd taken the sixth step, I was made aware of it. Without thinking, it was a totally spontaneous and thoughtless process. I was on my knees taking the seventh step. And that day I was given a gift of prayer. Now I've come to believe that the gift of prayer may be the most precious thing we're given by whatever this power is that created this universe and us and whatever else. With this gift of prayer, it starts to take on a living reality in our lives. And I believe, from my experience as the prayer, that there is nothing to pray for. There's nothing to get. There's only everything to give. And I believe AA is a perfect place to give everything away. And I know that I'm only aware of having it in the first place while I'm in the process of giving it away. I have the kind of personality that wants to sit down and think real hard and become aware of everything I know. No wonder I realize I'm so stupid. You know? This doesn't work that way, Clyde. Now, so anyway, I also know from my experience as the prayer that I don't pray to God. There's absolutely nothing to pray to, but I pray from God to God. And it's all totally an inside job, an absolute inside job. And I believe the prayer that mends the broken hearts and heals the sick minds that we all bring to Alcoholics Anonymous is the song of love that we sing to this thing called God. I believe that song is heard in every heart throughout the world, and it's heard throughout the entire universe. And with steps 10 and 11, we can not only sit and hear that song, but experience the simple truth that in all of the universe there is only one song, and we are that song. All of God's kids make up that song, and each and every note obviously is just as important as the other. Regardless of how I may judge and what I may judge, each and every note is just as important as the other. And obviously that song is in a constant and perpetual state of flux. It is always changing. Yet I want to hold on. I want to hold on to what I know, what I have, and at the same time experience my place in that song. It can't be done. The way for me to do that, and as far as I can find out up to this point in my sobriety, the only way is for me to be willing to just let go of everything. Let go of absolutely everything. And then I can, to whatever degree I do that, I can experience my place in that song. It's pretty incredible to think that for so many years I didn't even know that that song existed. I had to drink my way into absolute abomination. I had to be as rotten as I could possibly be and still stay alive in order to experience the most exquisite treasure in the world. I can't think my way into that. I can try to understand what has happened, but I can't think my way into that. So at the 7th step, I have the gift of prayer. At the 9th step, I was given the gift of love. I have been given up for dead, I think 4 times, so give or take, whatever. And the only thing that kept me alive was what I thought was my hatred for God. And I may be right about that. I mean, it literally energized me. You know? You want to really get a little energy going. Just work up a little hate. Boy, does that work. On an individual basis or a mass basis. So, I thought that was the only thing, my hatred for God. And it turns out 6 months with you, it gets turned into a love affair. How in the hell can that be? Yeah. I didn't understand it at first, and then I read Alcoholics Anonymous Comes of Age. And in the back of that book, they quote an old Spanish philosopher. It's a line that explains the whole phenomenon. Those who deny God deny him because of their despair at not finding him. How simple and obvious once you've experienced that. I can't think my way into that. And I certainly can't think my way into that awareness. An ancient axiom says the holiest ground in the world is where an ancient hatred has been turned into a current love. So because of what has happened for me in Alcoholics Anonymous, wherever I am standing on the holiest ground in the world. I believe it's impossible to take the first 9 steps without standing on the holiest ground in the world. It may take you as long as it took me to become aware of that, but I believe it's an inevitable and predictable result of the decisions and actions preceding that step. So, having had a spiritual awakening is the result of these steps. The only thing we're working towards and for is a spiritual awakening. And in the second appendix of the book, it discusses these things. Very simple language. A personality change sufficient to recover from the disease of alcoholism. I obviously thought I'd have a spiritual awakening and I'd become God's little sunbeam. Never say another word in anger. Just wake up each morning. Bless all you yahoos. Suffer the ignorant to come unto me. You know, one of the great things is that among other things, the word spirit means essence. The Latin root is spiritus. It means breath. In Alcoholics Anonymous, we're not dealing with some convoluted or involved dogmatic concept. We're simply dealing with the essence of life, the very breath of life. And the book tells us exactly where we find this great reality. And there's only one place that it can be found, deep within ourselves. It doesn't exist anywhere else. Deep within ourselves. So I thought I would just be Mr. Wonderful. And I found out of some things about me that at one point I could say we're due to this or we're due to that. Anyway, I have a difficult time living in this world. I seem to keep doing it, though. I don't understand that. But anyway. Oh, man. Bless us all, said Tiny Tim. Look at that little kid. Now, he never had to go work for a living, for Christ. He had it easy, just hobbling around there. So, after being together for 15 years, my wife had to leave because my illness was just too much. I'd stay locked in my room without food or water for days, try and knock the house down with my head. That affects people. So she had to leave, and this is the most remarkable thing. I don't know how this happened. Love is the only answer, I guess. I accepted full and total responsibility for her need to leave. It just, again, I didn't think my way into that. It's something that came up and just enveloped me. I accepted that responsibility. Our son, who was 12, elected to stay with me. And I hadn't worked for many years, as well as being wacko. I was physically incapable of working. So we had no money. And we were in Massachusetts at the time. And Billy and I got back to L.A., and I got on welfare. And I found a little 2-room apartment for he and myself. When we moved in there, we had 2 suitcases each. He had an old army cot somebody gave him to sleep on, and I had a piece of foam rubber that somebody gave me to sleep on. And that was the extent of our stuff. I was 14 years sober. I was suddenly a single parent on welfare. To this day, I have no idea how I survived. None whatsoever. I'd get up in the morning, and I'd make breakfast for Bill. We'd pray, we'd meditate, he'd go to school, and I'd sit there and cry. I just had no way of dealing with my life. Somehow, I didn't drink. I went to meetings and I helped drunks. Fortunately, there were about 5 meetings a week within walking distance, because we had no car, and then people would drive me around. And then I experienced the fellowship in a way I never had before, because you literally fed us, you clothed us, everything necessary for sustaining life, everything came from the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I used to draw a very clear distinction between fellowship and program, and I can no longer do that. We are all either one or we don't exist. Nothing exists. One day my wife called and said she was in love with someone else, and by that time I was desiccated. There were no tears left, nothing. I was just totally overwhelmed. I've never had such pain in my life as that separation. How I survived, I'll never understand. I don't think I will. I mean, I can give you words, but it's beyond me how I survived those years. But as I say, fortunately, I accepted the responsibility, and I was praying for my wife, and the most remarkable thing happened, maybe the most remarkable experience of my life. I heard myself thanking God that she had someone to love, that she had someone to share her life with, to share her body with, to share her program with, and to share her God with. Now I know I'm not capable of sitting down and formulating such a prayer. I don't believe that's my responsibility. I believe I have one responsibility with every breath I take, and that is to suspend judgment and ask love to guide me. It's to simply be of love and service. I think that's the whole Megillah right there. And I believe what happened is that your love for me wrote that prayer. You not only wrote the prayer, but you put the words in my heart, so that when my heart broke with her leaving, it broke open to the love that was always in there, the thing that I've been seeking all my life, the one thing I believed I was incapable of doing, that was constantly destroying me. It broke open to that. And then I had the honor and privilege of voicing and speaking those words and experiencing the results of that prayer. See, when I got here like everyone else, insulated and isolated in the eye of alcoholism. When I get here, and the very first word of the program is we admitted. We not only admit each other to these rooms, we admit each other to our hearts. And instantly, the we of Alcoholics Anonymous. It replaces the I. That I of alcoholism, that devastating, lonely sense of separation. And as we continue to practice these principles, we experience the one, the oneness of all life. When I got here, you did not judge me by the appearance of my illness. You saw beyond the crazed, drunken beast that I believed I was. Beyond that, you saw a sober being. Within that sober being, you saw light and you saw love. And you held that image of me in your mind as you nurtured me, you loved me, and most importantly of all, you allowed me to make every mistake I must make in order to learn what I need to learn to stay sober for the next 24 hours. And more as I continue to come back to you, I am becoming that image that you have of me, as you are becoming the image that I have of you. And together we are becoming the vision that God has of us. Happy New Year.
Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with, and it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.